Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Oh yeah, my lord. Welcome to the There It Is podcast. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Wherever you are, I hope you are dancing to this funky music. If anyone asks, just tell them that you have their-itis. Let's do this. I really do hope people are dancing to the music when it plays, because that is a side effect of having their-itis, dancing to the There It Is theme song. Shout out to Neil Brooks for giving me that instrumental. Hey, if this is your first time listening to the There It Is podcast, thank you for listening. This is a great episode, but I have other great episodes for you to enjoy too. Check them out. They are all fun. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You can find us on SoundCloud. Leave a review. Also engage us on social media. You can follow us on Twitter at ThereItIsPod and like us on Facebook. Go to ThereItIsPod.com to check out blogs, and you can listen to the episodes there as well. I mentioned today's episode was great. It is. I have the super nice and super talented writer for Last Week Tonight, Josh Gondelman. He was also one of the two brains behind Modern Seinfeld, the Twitter account that wrote premises of Seinfeld episodes if Seinfeld was still on today. It's a fun talk. We talk about both of those ventures, as well as his book and how he got into stand-up. It's all coming up after this. Do you toss and turn at night because you want more of the There It Is podcast? Are you growing despondent between episodes? Do you often wonder where it is? I'm Jason Farr, and you may have their-itis. There is no cure for their-itis, but you can join a support group, the There-itis Foundation. Support the There It Is podcast to keep your their-itis at bay, as in B-A-E. Go to ThereItIsPod.com and click the support button. You can support one time only or become a monthly supporter. Supporting the There-itis Foundation allows for us to keep getting the word out about their-itis through the blog on ThereItIsPod.com and the podcast. You don't catch their-itis. Their-itis catches you. But it's okay. And I should know. I, too, have their-itis. So, Josh, you've done a ton of things. You're quite the accomplished man. I mean, you've written a good bit. You've had a lot of things published. You've been published in New York Times and the New Yorker, and you have also been an Esquire and BuzzFeed. You worked at BuzzFeed for a bit, and you've written a book.
I did one freelance piece for BuzzFeed that was really fun.
Oh yeah, okay, and then also, like, a lot of people, of course, know you from stand-up and Last Week Tonight, but you were also one of the co-creators of Seinfeld Today.
Yes, that's true. My friend Jack Moore and I created that together, and that's a really fun little thing.
Yeah, it's super fun. As a big Seinfeld fan, it's a real fun thing, and I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's nice to do. It's kind of like it's a Twitter account for people that don't know, which is probably most people, it's a Twitter account that's like plot lines of Seinfeld episodes were Seinfeld to exist now, in the present day, in our estimation, which is a lot of fun. It's like, I mean, the characters are so vivid and the style of the show is so distinctive that it's really fun to just kind of like plug and play with like a new topical event or technological phenomenon to figure out, like, how would Elaine interface with Snapchat or whatever.
Yeah, it's super popular. It's doing real well. Before we get into, because I definitely want to pick your brain on your process in creating all the different kind of things that you create.
Sure.
What inspired you to get into comedy?
Oh, man. I guess I always really loved jokes, even from the time I was a little kid. Mm-hmm. And I've always really even reading like joke books that you would get from the Scholastic Book Club or whatever. It was always something I was excited about. And I always loved comedies as like a genre of like film and television. I loved comedy and still do. And I think it just always interested me as something I wanted to like try to be a part of because it was all my favorite stuff.
Yeah, and you're from the Boston area, right?
I am, yeah. I grew up just outside Boston.
So, I mean, I've never been there. So for people like me, my understanding of the Boston area is a really sharp, sarcastic wit.
Yeah, it's, I guess, sharp. It's very sarcastic. And I think the sharpness or bluntness is on a spectrum. But I definitely think there's like a sarcasm to the town and like a not taking crap from people. That's like part of the sense of humor. So like sometimes it can be like a really sharp, incisive jab, or sometimes it could just be really blunt sarcasm, like, yeah, good idea, pal. You know, like that, which I think is also a very valuable form of sarcasm.
Right. Oh, certainly. Yeah.
That I always admire. I like admire bluntness in people's comedy when it works.
Yeah, which is interesting because you're such a kind-hearted person and such a nice person that someone even wrote, like you were kind of the poster child for nice people comedy of today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for saying so.
Well, I mean, it's not even just me. I mean, what was that? A New York Times article? What was that article that?
Yeah, there was a really nice Times article about like kind of gentle-hearted comedy, and I had the good fortune to be featured there with like Josie Long was mentioned and spoken of a lot, and like Ron Funches and Pete Holmes and Ryan Hamilton. So it's great company to be in, all people that I really, really look up to and admire.
As do I. Yeah, that's definitely a good read. So would you say that your experience growing up in Boston sort of informed sort of your humor? Because you do have a sharp wit yourself.
Well, thank you. I do. I think so. I think like I'm kind of a very gentle person by nature and upbringing, but I also think that growing up in Boston and especially doing, like playing sports when I was a kid and doing comedy in and around Boston kind of helped me develop like a thicker skin than I might have gotten if I'd grown up in like in Asheville, North Carolina, or like a Portland, Oregon. I might have been even softer as a human.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. So when did comedy become an idea as a career move for you?
So I went into college thinking I was going to write something, plays or books. I went in as like a theater major, prospectively. And by the end of my freshman year, I think I was like, well, I'll be a writer. I'll write something, but probably not theater. And I had I'd done a couple stand-up sets on campus, like, oh, this could be fun. And I think I did one or two in high school, like at talent nights at a local Boys and Girls Club or something. Yeah. But after my freshman year in college, I was like, okay, I'll start to try to do it. Like for real. So I started doing open mics in Boston. And so by the time I graduated college, I was doing a lot of stand-up and writing at school. But the couple of years after, my writing kind of fell off because there were no assignments, but I kept doing stand-up and was like, oh, maybe I can move in this direction. And I was, by the time I graduated, I was getting paid gigs and working around the Boston area. And so it felt like a side job or like a second job at the least at that point.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see how everything weaves in. What was the next thing for you after, was it, New York and stand-up career or what?
So I was working in Boston still. I was teaching preschool, and I was working during the day, tutoring in the late afternoons, and then going out and doing stand-up every night. So that was kind of like my schedule on the weekdays. And then I would do, sometimes a little further from home, like go around New England on the weekends. And it was all great, and I really liked it. But I wanted to figure out what I could do to get to the next level in terms of like getting better at stand-up, getting more gigs, like being on the road more, doing less like that was just confined to a small geographical area.
And when was this? What time?
So this was like around this. So this is around kind of like 2010. I'd been out of college for a few years, and I was ready to like try something else. So I was doing festivals, and I ended up doing the Laughing Skull Festival in Atlanta, which was super fun.
Oh yeah.
And it was a competition. So I won the inaugural one of those, and that kind of got me out into the world a little more. And that's when I started thinking like, okay, maybe I've accomplished all I can in Boston, and I should try New York, because there are not necessarily that I would succeed right away, but there are more and different kinds of opportunities there that I wasn't getting where I had started, like writing opportunities or performing, seeing people that, like national headliners on a nightly basis. And so I was excited to move to New York and give that a try.
Yeah. So how did some of those writing jobs come to you?
Some of them, so I just started writing for places with kind of low barriers for entry in terms of like, you didn't have to know an editor, you could submit.
Like McSweeney's, maybe something like that?
Yeah, McSweeney's, you can just submit. They have open submissions, and they won't take stuff if they don't like it. But, it's not that they publish everything, so which is actually kind of beneficial too, because when you run something on McSweeney's, it's been vetted and people trust that it'll be good, and then readers of the site will read it. It's not like something that they might browse across casually and be like, nah, because they have such a strong curatorial voice. Yeah. So because they don't take everything, it's like kind of it's a thrill. It was a thrill for me every time really that I get published there. So it's very exciting and nice.
So you started writing more and more, and presenting yourself and submitting yourself to bigger things too.
Yeah, and then you start getting asked to do stuff. You know what I mean? They don't. Start getting asked to do stuff. Like once people see your writing, some places they go, "Hey, you wrote this thing. We'd love for you to write a similar thing or a different thing. Or have you ever written anything like this?" And then you get to kind of branch out a little bit, which is really nice. And that opens doors. You meet people. You go, "Oh, I'd love to write for this," and you find people that know how to help you do that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, how would you say your stand-up career and your writing career, how long did it take before you really started getting some traction?
In terms of stand-up or writing? Or both?
Or both, like the writing and the stand-up.
I guess the writing happened a little faster than the stand-up, but I think it was probably because I'd already practiced writing, in college and had written stuff before, whereas stand-up, it just took me a few years even to feel like, oh, I know at all what I'm doing here. So I think stand-up kind of started taking off in 2010 when I won this festival, and I'd been doing it for about 6 years at that point, almost 6 years. And then writing stuff kind of took like a year until I was freelancing kind of steadily, not necessarily doing a ton of super high profile or high paying stuff, but was able to like get work. And some of it was really fun and exciting, and some of it was like, little stuff here and there, and I would kind of do everything. And then a little while after that, I got into became comfortable with the idea that I could say no to things and didn't have to like write anything for any amount of money or no money.
Right. How did you come up with your ideas for your writing, for your the stuff that was published?
So some of it was stuff that was assigned to me, which is fortunate. I like homework.
Right.
I'm always happy to have like homework assignments as a professional. And then some of it was stuff like, I would recap a show for a season, or sometimes it was just stuff like when I was pitching things to McSweeney's or the New Yorker, it was just something that would spark in my mind, and I would go, oh, maybe this would make a stand-up bit, or maybe it doesn't quite have the rhythm or the scope of a stand-up bit. So why not try why not try writing it out and seeing if it works as like an 800, 600,000 word humor piece.
Right. Now, you wrote a piece called Both Sides of a Breakup.
Oh yeah, that was with my ex-girlfriend, a friend of mine, Gabby, who we had just broken up, and we were asked to do, like,
Oh, okay.
an editor that they were trying to do a whole series. I don't know if they ended up doing many, but they tried to get people. Well, I think they were having trouble finding two people who had just broken up that would both write about it and both felt good putting their names on it. That's like
And could also write well.
Yeah, I think it's
Well enough
a
for New York Magazine.
small subset of people, who are, I mean, not because it's anything special about me or my ex-girlfriend.
Oh no,
but
it's just someone
it's,
being willing to. That
Yeah.
filters out so many people.
I think it has a specifically, like you have to have a specific kind of breakup to be willing to do.
Exactly. That's what I was just about to say. If somebody had a real nasty breakup, it's like, I don't want to write with them.
Right, right.
I don't want to talk about it.
Or sometimes one person feels that way and the other person is like, oh yeah, this is fine. And the other person is like, no, this is like a deep pain I'm still feeling.
Right. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's going to eliminate 9 out of 10 people right there.
Yeah, so I don't know if they have the series or if the series still runs. I don't think I've seen many others, but it was fun. It was fun to do,
Yeah.
and like I think we both learned about the other's perception of the breakup by doing that together.
Did you sit and write it together, or did you kind of write your side and she wrote her side?
We wrote it separately and then showed our sides to each other just to make sure that we weren't saying anything like hurtful or telling tales out of school.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. It's a nice way to do that. So what came next? Was it Seinfeld Today that was kind of the first?
Yeah, so that was like the next thing that kind of popped off in terms of like I was writing for a bunch of freelance stuff and was very pleased with getting to do that work and for places like New York Magazine's various blogs and a couple of things that went on the New Yorker's website and Cosmo and Women's Health. Mm-hmm. And then this, the modern Seinfeld Twitter kind of took off. It happened. It happened and took off very quickly. So I was tweeting about it from my own account, just like, here would be funny episodes of Seinfeld were to exist. And then my friend Jack Moore was like, this should be a thing. And he grabbed the Twitter account and we started writing it together. And it became this whole, like, it just kind of took off very quickly and became kind of a calling card, which is exciting. It's like it was the first thing that I was a part of that people could trace back to me and be like, oh, you're the guy that did this thing, like an ongoing thing, not just like, oh yeah, maybe I read that one piece here, but it's like, oh, here's a thing that people could be like a fan of or enjoy on a daily basis.
What made you to stop doing it back in 2015?
I mean, we just were really busy, and it kind of takes keeping it top of mind to do, because by the time, if you're like circle back to something 2 weeks later, it's kind of too late for it to be effective.
Oh, yeah.
So it just hasn't been top of mind. We haven't like quit doing it, but it's just, we haven't been thinking about it specifically. So it's kind of laid dormant.
Yeah, I understand that. But a book came out of it, a book called You Blew It. That was sort of you and the other creator of wasn't you and Jack Moore wrote that?
No, that was me and my friend Joe Berkowitz.
Oh, right, Joe Berkowitz.
Yeah.
But wasn't it based kind of on the modern Seinfeld Twitter account? Not
quite. It has a similar feeling, I think, of like, here's some really, like, I guess I kind of think in like that picky Seinfeld type analysis of things sometimes. Like, it's a very stand-up filter to see things through. And so there's a little bit of that in the book that just kind of came out naturally, of like, Joe and I had pitched a different book and we were asked to write like kind of a general guide to like etiquette or living in the world. And so we ended up writing this that has like some Seinfeld type tendencies to it, which is like, tangentially related, but it was really fun to work on. And Joe's really funny and talented as well. And it was great to like work closely on a project with him for a year and a half.
Yeah. So when trying to create stuff, tweets for the Twitter account and write for that book through that mindset of, as you said, the pickiness. What is the approach? I mean, that's the thing I'm trying to dissect right now, is the sort of tendencies of the Larry David style of humor and the Jerry Seinfeld style of humor that created Seinfeld. How would you kind of break that down?
In what way do you mean? I'm sorry.
They have this specific voice. Like an example is what comes to mind for me. When Larry David hosted SNL this season and he did Burn Your Enthusiasm, a riff on what if Bernie Sanders was the main character on Curb Your Enthusiasm approach, right? And there's that bit where he's coming off speaking, and there are all these supporters that want to shake his hand, and then it comes to Leslie Jones, and she coughs in her hand, and then she goes to shake Bernie Sanders' hand. He goes, "No thanks." It's sort of. I get why you don't want to do it, but because of that social setting, you kind of can't. But he puts his foot down and does it, refuses to shake her hand anyway. So it's such a weird twist, and I'm trying to figure out, how do you come up with ideas similar to that?
Oh, I mean, for the modern Seinfeld Twitter account, it was definitely very much like, okay, here's something that exists, and here is like the very specific like character from Seinfeld or situation like what you would see on Seinfeld that is a tweak on it. So it was like very guided, it was a very specific thing we were doing. And then with the book, I mean, the book was like less on that premise. So it more just kind of came out of that voice because it was like a lot of it was the subject matter that kind of drove it. And then the angle was so the book was about how everything is kind of a nightmare even under the best circumstances. And that's like okay to feel and okay to admit. And you just have to get through it. And it's okay to feel inconvenienced by things, but you just have to like grow up and do it. So that, which is also kind of, it's not that far off from like the thesis of Seinfeld, right? A show about nothing. And this was a book about problems that are usually worth nothing, but it's kind of the everything of like, we like taking, being in traffic. That's not a public ill, you know what I mean? It's not the worst thing that happens to human beings, of course, but it is something that like everyone can feel and relate to and feels is unpleasant.
Yeah,
and so
exactly. It's different. That's different than a first world problem.
Right. So it is different. Right.
It's something that anyone anywhere in the world, first world or not,
of course,
if in this situation, they would be having the same experience. We just don't typically voice those complaints.
Right. Because they're kind of these, I think first world problem kind of writes off places that aren't like, I don't know, I guess what you would call a developed nation or, like the United States or maybe a Western Europe, the way that's what people are talking about usually.
Right.
But so it kind of writes off like, people in Kenya have problems with cell phone reception too. So, you know what I mean? But like it's, and there are cities, but it's also just like those kind of picky, like non-life threatening problems are what we focused on because I think the humor that comes out of life-threatening problems is not something that's not exactly what I didn't feel like the right person to take that on.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I mean, that's one of the struggles I have in my comedy when I try to write something about more serious stuff that's going on, and I see other comics do brilliant work on the subject. I don't have a joke, it feels like. It's like, here's an opinion. I don't want to do that. I want to have a joke. I feel like sometimes I'm not the right guy for the more serious stuff.
And I think that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I think that everybody has a different skill set, and we don't all have to be the best at every kind of comedy and writing. I think it's more beneficial to speak from your own point of view and like highlight voices maybe that can better speak to these other things and like trying to cover everything as like an or a tourist. You know what I mean? Like, I think there are lots of there are lots of people that turn kind of depression and anxiety into like really beautiful, funny comedy. And it's like, why would I try if that's not something that feels natural to me to write about or like relevant to my experience in an authentic way? It seems like a more beneficial thing to do is to write the things that I feel strongly about and feel passionate about and feel knowledgeable about, and let like, you know, people like Chris Gethard and Jacqueline Novak and Aparna Nancherla like show, you know, find ways to enjoy and appreciate their comedy and share that with people than trying to like do everything myself.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I need to give myself a little grace in some of these situations.
I think that's absolutely true. There are so many things that it's like, well, I'm not the guy to write that joke, or I tried but this other stuff comes really naturally to me. And sometimes that is, I think there's a tendency to write off the thing that comes easily as like
there is
not worthwhile. But I think on the other hand, sometimes what comes most naturally, what you really like to write about, is like the stuff that is your voice.
Absolutely, yeah. I like where you're going with that, because you're right. People do, and I don't mean others judge other people saying you're not doing what you're doing the simple thing. Don't do that. I mean, we judge ourselves. When it's something that comes easy, then we say, well, maybe it's low-hanging fruit because it's coming so easy for me.
And sometimes it is, obviously.
Sometimes it is, right.
Sometimes you see, like, especially if it's a joke that you can see everybody is making. Like, I feel like there was a period that has, I mean, there's always, like, a couple things where you'll go to every town or every open mic within a town, and everyone has like kind of the same joke on a topic, right? Mm-hmm. It's like there was a period, and I don't want to sell out anyone or sound like I'm criticizing anyone individually for writing this joke, but there was a period where a lot of people wrote the joke about if I have an erection for 4 hours, right, based on the disclaimer.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like it's a funny joke, right? Like it's technically sound, and it's like a funny idea. Like, hey, if you have a 4 hour erection, call your doctor. I'm not calling my doctor. It's like, okay, I get it. It's funny and it works. But that's like the kind of thing where when that comes naturally to you, that has nothing to do with like your voice specifically, right? That has to do with like you're reacting to an external stimulus that a lot of people are getting and having the same reaction to. But if you have an immediate response to something and other people are not having that response, that doesn't mean it's low-hanging fruit. It just means you saw this phenomenon in an interesting way. Right,
exactly. That's the distinction between the two. I can see everyone else saying this, and I guess there's even a gray area there. Like, there have definitely been times where I wrote a joke and it just felt so familiar, but no one else had heard it.
Yeah,
I asked them.
And that just probably is because it's like familiar to your own thoughts and point of view a lot of the time. I feel like there's due diligence you can do. Like you can ask around with friends. You can watch the person you think you might have like been influenced by. And if you do all those things and you still can't figure it out, then it's like, well, it seems like you're in the clear until someone tells you otherwise.
Right. When you came up with the idea for Modern Seinfeld, was it that idea of like when your buddy said, oh, this needs to be on Twitter? Like, what was it? No one else has thought of this and it's a good idea. I mean, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think it just seemed like when I was tweeting about it from my own account and he was like, oh, there's like plenty of meat on this bone, right? Like this is a thing that people would like, and there's plenty to say with it and plenty to do with it, and like a lot of place to play around.
Right.
And people would respond to it because, I mean, partly because Seinfeld has such a strong following because it was such an amazing, hilarious TV show.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any idea that it would have taken off the way it did?
No idea, for sure. It like was immediate. It was the only thing I've ever been a part of that was like, oh, this is an overnight success and people wanted to talk to you about it.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
It was neat.
A couple years ago, you started working on Last Week Tonight with
That's
John
true.
Oliver. And at first, you were doing things on the web for them, because I know I saw a web video that was real funny that you were in.
Oh yeah, that was really nice. It was very flattering of them. I just kind of had like a smug hipster face and glasses, so they were like, "Oh, you should do it," and it was really like exciting to be asked to do it.
Oh, yeah, that was cool. That was a funny video. It was about gas prices.
It was it was sort of.
You were pumping
it was at a gas
gas.
station. Yeah, it was about I think Republican National Committee put out these ads that were like family Republicans and like black Republicans and hipster
right.
Republicans. So and they were just so the like young urban hipster was so tone deaf that it was just going around on email, and they were like, this has to be parodied. And that was before the show even started.
Yeah.
So that was really fun.
Oh, yeah. That's why it was a real big moment, I thought.
It was exciting. It was so like it was lovely to be asked, and I don't act a ton, but I think I did okay in them.
Yeah,
so
you crushed it, and it went well virally, online.
Oh yeah, it was wild. I mean, it was nice to have like the platform of the show and HBO to push it out.
So for that season, you were a producer of web content, and does that mean you're writing and putting together videos like that?
Yep, stuff like that and the social media stuff. So that's what I did my first season.
And the second season, you became a staff writer.
It's true. And that was really wonderful too. So I'm still like have my eyes on the digital stuff just because I still have that skill set, and it's and so I haven't entirely left that domain, but now I write for the show.
Yeah, that's great. That's super
Thank
awesome.
you. It's really wonderful.
On both, yeah.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and everyone there is so kind and talented, and it's a great office to be in. And
Yeah,
great
it seems
to
like
work.
a real good crew, and you got a good boss there.
Yeah, it's great. They're all great.
So what kind of content are you responsible for as a staff writer?
Oh gosh, just like pitching stories, writing outlines and drafts, punching up with jokes. We kind of all do. All the writers do similar things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have found tough for me to be able to do well is satire.
Sure.
Which, of course, like Last Week Tonight is one of the leading comedy houses right now in our country, and I would imagine overseas as well. And it's leading that charge with satire. How do you take some of these stories, and some of these stories are sad stories, but how do you take them and make them the comedy gold that you guys are making?
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. I mean, it helps to have so many smart people all the way through. Every part of the staff is really talented and capable. So from like finding material and finding footage to figuring out like what kind of stuff is factually accurate or inaccurate about the stories we're seeing, and just finding the funny way in, because some of the stuff is so on the surface so sad, but you find someone who's saying something preposterous and monstrous, and you can mock that, or you find some kind of inconsistency, and it kind of unravels from there, is what I look for. I can't speak for anyone else. I mean, I can't really speak on behalf of the show, but that's
Right.
kind of what I try for as a way in.
I find myself a lot of times when I'm watching a comedy show that I have the same perspective. And I don't mean necessarily political perspective. I just mean I find myself saying like, yeah, I totally understood that. I'm on the same page with them. The problem I have is then trying to come up with the comedic ideas. Like, how do I make it break?
Totally. I think it's just like getting really thorough and reading a lot about it and watching a lot of footage about it and finding the kind of little cracks in the story that aren't just like, that aren't just like the nitty gritty of this happened. I mean, sometimes a funny thing happens, and that's worth talking about too. Like,
Right. The cheap thing, of course, would be to make a whole piece about somebody's voice, like what their voice sounded like, right? And whenever I do see that being addressed in a satirical piece, it's always an aside. It's a throwaway comment. The nitty gritty is where the humor is coming from, and like of these pieces, the bulk of the humor.
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out like how can I train myself just to learn how to do it. I'm definitely going to take your advice and say I don't have to be able to do everything, but
Sure.
the whole point of this podcast, I guess, is for me to learn how to do it.
Sure.
What would be kind of like an exercise somebody could do to figure out how to exercise is not the right word, but
Honestly, I think the best, I can't speak necessarily for myself, but one thing I really admire, or I can't really speak to like how I do it just because it's just kind of like practice and practice and practice. And finding like, these little ways in. But I think that one place to do, if you're like looking for satire, is to just like read The Onion. And it's so good. Like, I know that's almost like something we take for granted, and it's like a national treasure. It's just like the Onion is going to be, they get it right like so astoundingly frequently, and they have such great angles and like strong takes on something.
Yeah.
And I really, really, I really like it, and which is so facile to say. But what I mean is like, I learn a lot from just reading that and being like, oh, that's like exactly the thing that needed to be said about this political event or this social phenomenon, and not not to copy it directly, but to kind of like see what is it that they go after, what are the targets of the jokes, and how do they mine that for comedy. I think that's like it's a clinic, because I think when a lot of people make jokes about the news, like you said, there's like there's like kind of the easy thing to do, like this person has a funny voice, which is like very funny to make fun of someone's funny voice,
right.
But it doesn't get to the same level as like, what is the foundational flaw with this policy, or like hypocrisy with this point of view, and I think like just that The Onion to me is like the greatest clinic in that.
Yeah, they certainly are. I don't know how they do it so well, so consistently. They have just brilliant writers here.
Yeah, they're really good.
Typically, we're winding down here, so typically at the end of an episode, I like to create something with the guest, be it a joke or, in the last episode, I created a curriculum with for an improv class with Jill Bernard, which was a lot of fun. So you have your tools. There's web content, there's writing satires we were just talking about, and there's, of course, jokes, stand-up jokes, and, of course, the modern Seinfeld tweets. What would you most want to do right now? What would you want to try to create?
Oh, man. What would you be interested in creating?
Well, I probably would say a modern Seinfeld. It's between modern Seinfeld and trying to break down a news story, but
let's do modern Seinfeld.
Yeah, let's do that. So what? How do we start?
Okay, so it's like, what's an interesting thing that is happening? Like, it doesn't have to be like, a super political or newsy thing, but like like just anything that's happened in pop culture the last week or so that's been really big.
Let's see. Big pop culture thing.
Yeah.
The last thing I can think of was something sad, and I'm trying to think of something not sad.
Sure.
What comes to mind, I was just with some friends who were talking about Snapchat.
Yep.
And there was talk about Tinder as well. I imagine you guys touched on Tinder, though.
Yeah, we've done a bunch of Tinder stuff, I think. Snapchat is interesting. So, something as simple as, like, Kramer tries to design George designs a Snapchat, tries to design a special Snapchat filter, like a location-specific Snapchat filter for a fake business that he invented to prove that it's real.
Yeah, okay, that's exactly what George would definitely be trying to pretend. The thing that came to my mind was him always wanting to pretend to be an architect.
Yep, pretend to be an architect, or was it one that he lied and said he was a marine biologist?
Yeah.
And
then there's Vandalay Industries.
So it's like something like that, like a Vandalay Industries, or like Elaine. So like similar to, there are episodes about trying to get something off of someone's answering machine, right? Like Elaine drops her phone in the sink and needs rice to dry it out so she can delete something she doesn't want you to see in her Snapchat story. Like something like
what if it was Jerry was dating somebody, but then he wanted to break up with her because of a filter she used on Snapchat?
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like he would be the nitpicky one to say, like, she uses this filter too much.
Or even just like, I've seen her as a dog. I can't see her as a person again. Like.
Are you a dog? Are you a person?
Yeah. Like the good naked, bad naked episode, right? Where it's like, no, a dog, you can't put a dog filter on someone's head and then be like, I'm attracted to that person because now they're part dog in my mind always.
How would it culminate with Kramer having a filter that's just of him?
Yeah, a Kramer filter like that. Yes, that would just be totally something that happened.
I like it.
Thank you.
There it is. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this was a great talk.
Likewise. Have a great day.
He is the nicest guy. I'm so glad he was here to share his wisdom with me. I had a great time talking to that very kind and talented man. Thanks, Josh. I was thinking, he's been part of two considerably well-regarded pieces of comedy over the last 5 years with Modern Seinfeld and Last Week Tonight. I mean, both of those things blew up and are very, very well-regarded. That's saying a lot because there's a lot of good comedy out there. So good for him. Good for us that he shared all that wisdom with us. He's got a funny comedy album out called Physical Whisper. You can buy it on iTunes. You can find it on Spotify. It's out there. Go check it out. Follow Josh on Twitter at Josh Gondelman. And you can also check out the Modern Seinfeld stuff that they did on Twitter at Seinfeld Today. Today's episode was sponsored in part by the early support of wonderful people like Miley White, Angela Barber, and Joe Johnson. Thank you so much for your support. If anyone else would like to support the podcast, you can at thereitispod.com. You can donate one time or monthly. It helps me to keep this ship going. May you all have their-itis. Follow me on Twitter at JasonFarJokes. Follow the podcast at ThereItIsPod. There it is, another episode of There It Is. In next week's episode, I have New York City improviser and instructor Douglas Whittick from hip-hop improv troupe North Coast. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.